Hi there, welcome back to my channel Chrome. I'm finally making a new custom doll today, and this time I actually let you vote on what kind of doll you wanted, and the outcome of both my Insta and my YouTube poll was the same, something mythology inspired, closely followed by another bug girl. I'm super happy you want to see more bugs since my ideas for new ones are endless and I really love them. I already started working on 2, but today we're doing mythology. The reason I put that in the poll was because I knew I wanted to make some Persian mythology inspired dolls. I think Persian mythology is extremely underrated and few people even know anything about it. In Western media they often like to just mush everything Middle Eastern and Middle Eastern adjacent together, and I kinda also did that for my genie doll where I just wanted to create a vibe, so I don't really see a problem with drawing loose inspiration from a larger area. But there are many distinct ethnicities and cultures in the Middle East, and I really want to focus on the Persian side of that today, and also on some future projects. Now, I struggled a bit with finding my first mythological creature I wanted to do. The most important Persian sources for that would be the Shahnameh, the national Persian epic, as well as Zoroastrian imagery. But in the Shahnameh, most of the characters are heroes that do have amazing and poetic stories surrounding them that I really love, but also for a doll would most often be a person in armor, which I see myself doing at some point, but this time I wanted to get more into creature territory. The other thing is that important animals in Persian mythology are oftentimes birds like the homor or simurgh. Definitely would like to turn those into dolls one day, but I just don't have a perfect vision for them in my head right now. There are also a lot of interesting creatures that are part of the folklore of Iran, and if I were to make one of those, I'd want to gather more information on them first, since it's not always super easy to find because they're so niche. Okay, this was a pretty long introduction of my thought process, but I'm also telling you this because I'd love to know which of these things sound most interesting to you for when I'm going to continue this series, so please tell me in the comments. Now, what did I actually choose? I went a totally different route and chose a creature which most people probably don't even know it originated from the Persians, and that is the Manticore. It certainly doesn't hold as much significance also in modern day Iran as the stuff I talked about before, but its origin story is still pretty interesting. But I don't want to bore you with any more intro yapping, so let's just get started and I'll sprinkle some of the info in along the way. I am really excited about my base this time. It's my first G3 doll that I ever customized, and it's this Cleo, and while I don't like her G1 face mold too much, I think her G3 one is divine. As you probably know, the Manticore has the body of a lion, the face of a human and the tail of a scorpion. I chose Cleo because I think her skin tone works really well with the lion theme, and her face also really fits the vibe, and the muscular legs. As always, I cut off the hair, soak the head in hot water to remove it, and then pull all the hair out of the neck hole. So the word Manticore comes from the word Manticore, which in Persian means man-eater. Mart means man, and khor comes from khordan, which means to eat. It gives you a pretty good idea of what this creature likes to do. And in Old Persian the words were actually like this, but I don't know how to pronounce Old Persian. The original source of its description comes from a Greek named Theseus. I tried to look up the pronunciation in English, so if it's wrong, don't blame me. But this is why it is sometimes referred to as a Greek creature, but he actually just wrote about what he had heard while working at the Persian court. This was during the Achaemenid dynasty around 5 BC. Okay, back to the doll. As you can see, I removed her face paint with acetone, and the ears also have to come off. I contemplated leaving them, but she will have lion ears and 2 sets of ears would just look weird. I planned them out with wires, and I also thought it would be cool to have them point to the back, like when cats or lions are in hunting mode. She's a dangerous man-hunting beast, so it makes sense, right? The process is pretty much what I did with my bat's ears. I use a third wire to plan the whole 3D shape out and then connect it all with arming tape. This gives me a perfect base to do all the sculpting. I'm sanding the bits where I cut the ears off a bit smoother as well. The arming tape sticks by itself, but it's usually not strong enough, so I reinforce it with some glue. I also figured that some parts are cut in too deep, so I fill that in with a bit of green stuff. Then I start sculpting the ears, first with air dry clay to fill in the gaps, and then for the more detailed sculpt with epoxy. In the end, I do some sanding for some extra smoothness. Oh, and I also thought about giving her a tongue to kind of represent her appetite. The Manticore is supposed to have 3 rows of teeth that I cannot show because I didn't want to cut open her face. So this would have been a bit of a replacement for that, but I had to remove it because with the ears it just reminded me too much of the Snapchat dog filter. Sorry if you liked it, but I just couldn't. Now it's time to get rid of the Cleo problem. I've had people say they never want to work with her again because of those molded on bandages, and I know they're not joking. I did most of it outside, so here's a little skip, and now I'm cutting her lower legs into 2 pieces. If you watch a lot of doll customization, you probably know what's coming. It's digitigrade legs. This way she will have a little more animal-like features, which is good since she's already more humanoid than the actual description. But also don't pay too close attention to the way I cut it. I changed my mind about how I am going to make the joint a few times, so the pattern that I cut off ended up being very unnecessary. I took all my inspiration for the joints from this Nightcrawler action figure that can move in every possible way. My initial thought was to make double joints, but then I figured out that the extra movement would actually look weird if this is the only double jointed part of the leg. The joint itself are these wooden popsicle sticks that I glue together and then cut and sanded into this shape that you need for double joints. But to make a single one, I can just separate the 2 rounded parts and make it 2 single circles. And then I can glue those into each top leg. It doesn't actually matter which way around you do it, but I want to build a little more around the bottom part to give it more mass so that the proportions won't look weird. To the 8% of you who subscribe for the garbage, don't worry, here it comes. These are some plastic handle things that are on packaging boxes sometimes, and the end pieces make pretty good counterparts for the joints. To connect it all, I use those plastic sticks that I have laying around. I drill holes into all the parts to connect them and make sure everything works well before gluing the bottom part. I cut it so that it fits into the hole, that way it is less prone to breaking off. To fixate the initial placement, hot glue is pretty useful because it doubles as filling material and hardens quickly. I also use a bit of EVA foam for some extra friction because I'm always scared the joints will become loose at some point. I definitely will look for some pieces that make good parts for joints that I can buy in bulk though. Looking for fitting pieces or cutting wood is just too much of a waste of time, and it's also not as even as it could be. I will sculpt around those joints with epoxy sculpt, and that will become rock hard and hold everything in its place. So I want to make sure that the outer joint parts are held as tight to the middle part as possible. So while sculpting, I push them in with these sticks and rubber bands. I do rough sculpt around all the parts and let it cure. I can then remove them and do the more detailed sculpt. The Manticore is described to have giant claws that are just as dangerous as the stings on its tail. So of course I want to sculpture some of those, and I'll just do it on top of the actual hands. They are supposed to look like monstrous paw-like hands, and the holes are to put the claws in later. This is totally a trust the process situation here. I know right now it looks like she's wearing gloves stuffed with pillows, but I just had trouble nailing the overall shape immediately, so I'm taking the subtractive approach and just carve the shape into it with an X-Acto knife once it's cured. Using X-Acto knives on cured epoxy sculpt actually works extremely well. I also carve her nail holes to be more of a V shape. And when I think I can work with the hand shape, I start sculpting in more details like the knuckles. There's also going to be another joint on the feet where the toes are. For that I first sculpt them round. I'm again using Nightcrawler for a reference. I want to make the toe joint similar but without articulating every single one of them. And again we get to have some trash pieces, this time from this plastic hanger that I used to make the toe joints. I cut off 4 strips, one for the left and one for the right side of each foot. And then I do pretty much the same as before. I drill a hole through the foot and all the side pieces and connect it all with a plastic stick. I use hot glue as a filler material again so that I have something I can sculpt onto. As always, I make a rough layer of epoxy first and then add more layers of detail. But in the meantime, I can start sculpting the actual claws. For that I recommend epoxy that has already gotten a bit harder, and then it's just rolling some sausages and making one end of it really pointy. In the end I give the pointy side a little curve. After doing some sanding, I can start attaching them to the hands. I just drill the finger holes big enough that they will fit in. A better way would be to push them in while the hand is still soft, but I already felt like I had little control over those while sculpting. I'd normally pin them too, but I think it will be fine like this. I was a little shook when I saw how they look like, because it is way scarier and exaggerated than I had expected, but I kinda dig it. When you look at lion claws, they have this skin around the claws that you can still see when the claws are out, so I'm sculpting that little detail on them too. Here's the finished sculpt, and I have to say it really gives me goosebumps. I wish you could touch it, it really feels like holding the hand of a tiny Nosferatu or something. I'm repeating the same procedure for the feet, but this time I'm definitely pinning in the claws, since there will be some force on them when the doll is standing up or is moved. And here I'm doing the last detailed sculpting while the claws are attached. Additionally, I sculpt a little socket for the 5th claw, right where the ankle is. And of course I'm also sculpting the little skins on the feet. Okay, so the claws are done now. We are still missing a substantial part of the Manticore, which is the scorpion tail, of course. And also, what would work better for that than to make a ball jointed tail, since the scorpion tail is segmented anyway and pretty much looks ball jointed. The only thing I was unsure about was the material, since it would need to stand up on its own and I feared that epoxy would be too heavy. So the test objects I have here are foam clay, air dry clay, this paper mache type material, and also I wanted to see how the results are with epoxy. Basically, I just need to make tons of these cone shapes with each of those materials. Right off the bat, I can say the paper mache didn't work at all, it just crumbled and it's not made for work like this. Air dry clay works fine, but I just don't trust it because it is so brittle. It might be fine, but there is a lot of force on the tail, so I'd like to find something else. Epoxy sculpt is definitely the easiest to work when sculpting. And then for the foam clay, I used super cheap one that I had lying around for ages. Most of them were half dried, which was actually the perfect opportunity to get some use out of them since I only want to test how it behaves first. But it made it a bit hard to work with it. However, when everything was cured, I was really impressed because it's not as soft as you might think and actually dries pretty sturdy. As expected, the epoxy tail was pretty heavy. It might actually work if you string it very tightly, but the rubber band would probably not survive very long. I also tested the stability of the air dry clay and it was actually better than I thought, but I still was able to break it quite easily. So to my surprise, the foam clay is actually the winner. It is so lightweight too, just perfect for what I want to do with it. It should look a bit neater of course, but I still have some of the silk clay which is not almost dried out and better quality. I also tried to make it more seamless by rubbing water on it, and again to my surprise this actually works extremely well. This way I could also blend the stinger I prepared into the tip that I also made out of foam clay. To make it all stringable, I cut a hole into the stinger piece and push a stick through it. This will hold one end of the rubber band. I also drill a hole into the doll's back and push a sturdy wire piece through there. Luckily those dolls are hollow inside. But before I string it, I want to paint all the pieces black. Paint also sticks pretty good to the foam clay. I gotta say that this is just a very underrated material. Also, I prepared many more stings when I made the claws. The Manticore is said to not only have the scorpion stinger but also multiple on the sides that it can shoot in all directions. A funny detail is that it can kill all animals with those except the elephant. I give each segment 2 stings and alternate between shorter and longer ones just because I think it looks good like this. And then I also felt that having the tail just stick out of the body like this wouldn't look super cohesive, so I sculpted some scorpion scale details on her back to make it blend together a little better. And then I can finally paint everything. First with this primer that somewhat fits her skin color. I like to just paint the whole leg if I have to color match, because slight color variations are more forgivable on separate segments. My old foam clay experiment doubles as an ear holder and now it looks like a weird little mouse head. The paint I'm using is a super cheap copper paint that already fits her skin tone pretty good with some adjustments. It is, as I said, very cheap though, so the pigmentation is bad. It has some shimmer in it too, and I don't know what it is about those paints, but they're always much smoother, which I'm happy about of course. No airbrush needed this time. Blushing and MSC will get rid of the shine later. But let's do the hair first. It's pretty straightforward this time. The Manticore's hair is described as cinnabar red. I don't know if this qualifies as cinnabar, but it's the only red I have and it's also a gorgeous color, so that's what we're using. I paint the scalp a matching color and then just start pushing the plugs in. I do create a middle part though, just by pre-making the holes with a needle. It's funny that I'm using the red since that was also part of my poll. Red hair is, I think, the most out of my comfort zone. Not sure why, but now it just naturally came to be the color of choice. And can we talk about how good this color looks with Cleo's skin tone? By the way, according to Theseus, he has actually seen the Manticore in Persia. He claims he was present when it was brought to the Persian king as a present, but it is also said that you have to take what he says with a grain of salt, which is something I have read many times about Greek historians, which is really funny to me. The Manticore is said to live in the Indian jungle. There are also a few accounts where people try to find out about the Manticore from locals, and they had no idea what they were talking about. Alright, the hair is all plugged in now, so I just need to put in some water and heat-proof glue. Let that dry and then lay everything flat with some boiling hot water. Before starting the face, I do have a lot of body blushing to do. This time it is especially important to make the painted parts blend together better. I use a light yellow for the highlights and very warm browns for the shadows. The claws will have a light beige color and the little skins are actually pretty pink on lions, so I'm doing that here as well. And then I put those tiny darker lines on them as an extra shadow. And then I can finally start with the face. I start with a good amount of blushing to match it to the color of the body. My initial thought was to make her look evil since she's a pretty scary beast that can kill multiple men at once, but I slowly liked the idea more to give her a confident expression like a lioness. Like she knows how dangerous she is and when she sees you, she knows you're already dead. And I also want to use a lot of red around the eyes. I changed the eyebrows to be more deep set too, and I make them pretty bushy because that matches the lion's mane. For the lower lashes, I want her to have one really long one. I think it just really fits the scorpion stinger vibe. Also, the eyeliner kind of goes up on the sides like the shape of a scorpion stinger. I paint the whites of the eyes with acrylics and also use a dark red acrylic to deepen all the colors. With black pastel, I create a shadow under the upper lid. When I am happy with the eye shapes, I use a light beige to paint the waterline. And the lips should just be a natural darker color. I also add a tiny bright red line right under the upper and lower lids as another small detail. I didn't find a clear information on the eye color. Sometimes it says gray, sometimes blue, and sometimes gray-blue. I think gray is cool, so I'm choosing that to be the eye color of my Manticore. With white pencil, I blush in some highlight in the iris. Initially, I wanted to make the pupil bright red as well, but figured it looks a bit out of place here. So I just settled with a normal darker gray pupil, but also made the edges a bit soft. Now I just need to draw in some darker details on the outer part of the iris, and with some catch lights, her face is done. Before we move on, I still need to paint her scorpion back piece black, and then I coat all the scorpion parts with this shimmery paint that has those reddish particles. I also did a test stringing, and look how well it stands and can be moved around. And we cannot forget to put in the ears. So for the clothes, my plans were to get inspired by Persian armor. Not fully historically accurate Persian armor, but you know, inspired by it. But I do need a base to work on first, so I thought maybe a simple dress, and for that I did take apart Cleo's original dress to create a pattern. It's a bit hard working on clothes for her since I don't have a spare Cleo body. I also didn't want to cover up her scorpion back piece. When I tested how the dress would look on her, I quickly realized that I don't like how it looks. It was too much looking like normal human clothes, and it was kind of giving Undertale character or something, which I mean cute, but not what I was going for. While looking at different Persian armor, my eyes fell upon these harnesses that are from the armor of the Sasanian dynasty, which lasted from 224 to 651 AD. So we're making a little time jump, but I'm not concerned with that for this concept. You might wonder why a Manticore would wear armor at all, but my headcanon is that she just picks up the stuff she likes from her victims. It was pretty easy to make the harness with some wobbler strips, and I made it in a way that I can just clip it on her body so the back will remain free. The middle piece is just this bead that has a pretty perfect shape, and the ornaments that you can see on different artworks depicting Sasanian armor can be recreated with these tiny rhinestones that are often used as rivets. I primed everything and then painted gold. And of course I put some wash on it to make it look more realistic. For all those colors, I choose the warmest shades I have because that fits the color scheme best. Of course my plan was not to have her boobs hanging out, but I figured if I just glue a piece of fabric behind those parts, that would do the job and also look really good, so that's what I did. Next, I wanted to have a belt that you can clip on in the same fashion, so I first create a base with another strip of wobbler. On that belt, I wanted to have these typical wings that you will see a lot in Persian artwork. If you see wings that look like this, you can be sure it's Persian. It was definitely a bit tedious to cut them out of wobbler because it is pretty hard to cut through, and it was even harder to create a perfectly mirrored piece, but it did work out. I heat them up and place them on the belt, making the outer corners of the wings stick out a bit. And then I put a similar centerpiece as with the harness in the middle of the belt. And it will all be the same gold color. But the wings are far from done, of course. I still need to replicate the feather patterns inside of them. I look closely at colored murals and paint in the shapes as accurate as possible. They usually use 3 colors and a lot of green and blue shades, so I chose 3 similar colors that also look good with my color scheme. I pay close attention to the gold gaps and repaint them if necessary. When it's too hard for me to nail the shape, I take care of blocking everything incorrectly first and then take care of recreating the golden gaps. The topmost feathers are often 2 rows of dots that I make with a dotting tool. This is for sure my favorite garment I've ever made. But we cannot leave it like that. She still needs a little more covering up. I once again got inspired by murals and other artwork, and the clothes in those are often these types of tunic. I want to pretty much attach a skirt to the belt for that effect, but I will leave a gap in the middle for another kind of fabric. I have this old blouse, and using the collar is a genius way to save some time because it is already sewn in the perfectly rounded shape I want. I can also just glue that on the belt, and I try to cut as much fabric off the glued parts as I can to avoid too much bulking up. Once both pieces are glued on, I plan out where I want to install the Velcro. I want to make them be able to be closed up below the tail, so I need to make them go down at an angle first. Then I sew all the seams. I want the centerpiece to be this perfectly dark red fabric that has also a nice shimmer effect. I cut out 2 rounded shapes, but I don't even need to sew them together because super glue works extremely well on this fabric. I turn everything inside out and flatten it with my mini hair straightener. and then I just need to glue it on the belt. And then the last step is the Velcro. I'm pretty happy with this outfit, but I think she needs more accessories. I want to make her some cuffs that go around the arms and legs. For the arms it will also help the proportions, because right now her hands are so much larger than her wrists. Again, I'm using Wobbler and then cut it into the pieces I need. As decoration, my inspiration comes from these parts of the murals. I'm pretty sure they are all from the Achaemenid period, so the timeline even matches the one of the Manticore here. I do have the centerpieces I used for the top and belt in smaller versions, and they also look pretty much the same as the elements in the murals. And I'm also using the little rivets again. And those thin strips of EVA foam will give it some more detail and structure. Those also need a paint job, of course. After washing everything, I also create some more highlights with gold paint mixed with silver. I wanted to create this pattern on the arm cuffs, but it just looked really bad. I don't know, maybe it's a skill issue, but I decided to just leave it out. In my mind, I naturally kinda had the Lion King lion's design as inspiration, and also Leonine Misbegotten. She needs some lion-looking hair for sure, so we're again layering the hair. I would have liked to leave it as long as it is, but I didn't want it to clash with the tail. And then I basically just keep separating them and making one layer shorter than the last. I honestly think hairstyling is the hardest to film, at least with my current setup. Layered hair is definitely also a trust the process situation when it comes to nylon. I go over every layer again with my tiny straightener with a little flick motion. This time not outward like with my stag beetle, but more rounded and swaying to the back. Also, I saw so many people put water on the hair when using heat. It feels so wrong to me because that's a crime to do on real hair, but now that I tried it, I'm never going back when it comes to synthetic hair. It really makes the whole process a lot smoother and prevents the hair from frying. And then the final step, I'm using some fake fur to glue into the ears to replicate how lions have fur in their ears. And here's my finished Manticore. I had so much fun coming up with her concept. As I said, please tell me which of the other concepts would interest you for the series. I think it will be a while until I continue it though, because I do have a lot of different other projects coming up. But also tell me which part you enjoyed most watching the Manticore girly, and if you learned something new about this creature, because I sure did. I hope I will see you again in my next video, and in the meantime you can follow me on my Instagram. I'm pretty active there and always enjoy talking to you. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!